We begin our treatment of choice in the presence of risk with the simplest possible framework, one in which money is all that matters. In other words, what we care about is how much consumption we can afford in different states of the world, where in better states we get more money, and in worse states we get less money. We use a utility-consumption relationship to indicate how much utility a person gets from different levels of consumption on the horizontal axis. This is simply a tool we use. We don't actually assume that we can measure utility in objective ways, but it's a tool that will help us distinguish between people who are risk-averse and risk-loving in the next graph. We imagine two possible outcomes: the outcome where my wife ends up with $250,000 and the outcome where she ends up with $10,000. We can then read off the utility-consumption relationship how much utility she gets from the $250,000 outcome and how much utility she gets from the $10,000 outcome. The utility of receiving $250,000 for sure is read off of point A, and the utility of receiving $10,000 for sure is read off of point B. The question now is, where do we read off the expected utility from receiving $250,000 with some probability and $10,000 with some other probability? Since the expected utility is simply a weighted average of the utility at A and the utility at B, it lies somewhere on the line that connects A and B. Where exactly it lies on that line depends on what probability is associated with A and what probability is associated with B. If each event happened with a probability of 50%, then the expected utility would be read at a point halfway between A and B on the dashed line. But since the $250,000 outcome happens with a 75% probability in our example, the expected utility occurs 3/4 of the way up towards point A on the dashed line. My wife's expected utility going into this gamble is therefore 32.5. The expected consumption level she undertakes is $190,000 because she gets $250,000 with probability 0.75 and $10,000 with probability 0.25. Were my wife to receive $190,000 in consumption with certainty, we could read her utility off at point D as 38.5. This points out an important distinction between the utility of the expected value of a gamble, which in our case is the utility of $190,000, and it's read off as 38.5, and the expected utility of facing the gamble, which in our case is read off of point C as 32.5. In our theory of choice under risk, this is really a key idea: the difference between the utility of the expected outcome of a gamble and the expected utility of facing the gamble. If you can understand the distinction between these two concepts, it'll go a long way towards helping you through the rest of the chapter.